Well, good evening and good to have you, and thank you for sticking around and joining us. We're glad you are kicking off your morning here with us as the week is off with 2 days to call it a close as we also usher in the month of July. Kickstarter for the financial year 2026-2027. Now into our Kickstarter conversations here. Now, trade rules that once anchored international commerce are fraying under the strain of protectionism, geopolitical rivalry and economic nationalism. That is from the Ugandan perspective, but also from the global terrain of things. Now, from Washington to Beijing to the UK, which is having a new prime minister by the look of things. The global economic weather is also now becoming unpredictable. However, for a small and open economy like Uganda's own, it's deeply plugged into global commodity markets, something to do with capital flows and donor financing. Now, we are going to have a conversation to pretty much understand where we stand as a country and how we can navigate Uganda's ability to withstand global turmoil. And with my analysts on set, I'll start with the lady next to me, Natasha Hadija Sebunya, foreign policy analyst. Natasha, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. I'm quite happy to be here.
All right. Pleasure is ours having you as well. We then have Abdul Nasser Barak, a foreign policy analyst, also on site. Good morning.
Good morning, viewers. I'm glad to be here.
And then lastly is Mark Mutumba, geoeconomist and also an analyst in the same.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching us from. It's an honor to be here to have a discussion around this topic.
Abdul, I'll start with you. Yesterday, President Museveni appointed an acting minister on foreign affairs. What awaits this minister in terms of the Uganda's foreign policy environment? He's new to that office. And when you look at how the shifts are changing and the tides are turning in geopolitical economics.
First and foremost, I was very pleased with the earliest appointment.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Adonia.
that was, Ambassador Adonia, that was a career diplomat. And that career diplomat has served this nation very well over the years without much ado. And right now we've got somebody who I've not known in foreign policy circles. I don't know whether they have the experience. I see it more of a career, more of a political appointment and more of a reactionary appointment. And that is one of our largest challenges as a nation. We are always reacting to issues, but instead of being proactive about it. Yeah. So should we have continued or maintained continuity in our foreign policy, we will have somebody with years of diplomatic experience. Now that has gone out of the door. And the question I would like to ask would be, in all the capacities, because Ambassador, and I'm not campaigning for him, I'm just stating the facts, he has represented this nation for many years at the highest levels. And the issues that came up, why didn't they come up then? Where was the scrutiny then? You see, it again comes out that we are basically reacting to issues. And even our appointing authority appears to be also reacting to the issues. So we have moved away from a foreign policy strategy that the continuity, so there's a breakdown in that continuity. Because this person, the new appointee, has to find a way of now learning the systems, which is going to be quite hectic because that docket represents how the rest of the world looks at Uganda. That docket represents how we are viewed from an outside. It determines how, because the investor will look at how we engage with other nations, and then they will determine, should we bring our money to your nation? You see? So our foreign policy right now is in uncharted territories, if I may use those words. And there's already, I believe, a lot of uncertainty there because of that breakdown. More than 20 20 years of experience have walked out of the door. And we've got a fresher.
Fresh.
I don't know whether he has been, you've heard of him before, somebody can correct me in that capacity. But I believe where the world is right now, we need somebody who is on top of the issues, not somebody who is going to just react to the issues. That has been our greatest challenge as a nation. We are always reacting.
Okay.
Hey, something has happened in the Middle East. Oh, now we run to firefight. No, our strategy should be repositioned to be proactive as opposed to being reactive.
Well, Natasha, our viewer would be interested in knowing how important is foreign policy diplomacy for Uganda now more than ever. And do we have a special leverage where we could say this is where we stand?
Okay, so I think foreign policy is always relevant. There's never a moment where foreign policy is not relevant. I feel like Uganda has always been an open country. You can see from refugee policy to our defense contracts to everything that we do that we're an open country and how we seek regional trade. So of course our foreign policy is quite relevant. I feel like though I'd like to maybe speak to the matter of Mr. Adonia Ebere. Like Barak here, I mean his track record is flawless. I mean this guy has 2 master's degrees. He has an impressive career in diplomacy. He was very vital in solving the Rwanda-Uganda border closure. I think he was appointed by Museveni to go behind the scenes and to counter, I think, his brother General Kandiho's CMI policy towards Rwandans. So I think this is somebody who everybody knows is very, very experienced and is very, very vital. So in a time like this, one wonders why the opposition would assert the constitution to question his dual citizenship. And of course, as the world is increasingly global, and as we've seen with countries like New Zealand and Canada that have set an exemplary course where you don't question someone's loyalty because of dual citizenship, as
but
the world becomes
a bit different though.
Yes. No, I will get to that, yeah. But I think you get so many constitutional abuses during this time. So I feel like the opposition really had to buckle down and put the constitution into question because we've had a lot of, amendment, a lot of stuff. So I think they did say that this is important that we stick to the constitution in this matter exactly. And with Mr. Adonia specifically, I think that why he became a fair target for the opposition is he hasn't been... For Parliament, but also the opposition, is that because he hasn't been very neutral. As a diplomat, he hasn't been very neutral when it comes to NRM. I think he's gotten into very, public spats with FDC affiliated kind of because of her husband, Muni Byanyima. He said some stuff. So I feel like in that, the opposition saw this figure that has proximity to the first family through relations.
Which also kills the intent of a representative on a global
exactly,
scale,
yeah,
right?
and so that maybe he had more loyalties towards NRM. So I think the opposition really had to see who this figure was and where he was coming from. And of course, there were 4 dual citizenship appointments. So of course, they had to buckle down and they had to assert the constitutional...
They were all vetted out.
Yeah, so they were constitutional purists. They said that, hello, this is not our constitution, so we cannot allow him, right? And of course, I don't think his career has ended. I don't think he's a loss to Uganda. I think he can still be appointed as special envoy, as that doesn't require parliament vetting, and he can still assert himself, diplomatically within the country, because I do feel he still has good relationships with the first family. But where I do agree with Barak, I do think the political appointment of Haruna as a replacement is also a bit political and it's a bit reactionary, because I feel like by the public rejecting Adonia, Museveni still gave them someone else.
We do have other faces, right?
Sorry?
I want to believe we do have other people who could come into that space.
Yeah, we do, but I mean, it's up to Museveni's appointment.
But
yeah,
it's up to the appointing authority.
Yeah, so I do feel like he could have found somebody else to replace. Yeah.
Yes, because right now, to the viewer out there, the world is in a different era.
Okay.
In terms of foreign policy, in terms of the general outlook. We had an era where the US was the known leader of the world and was there, led the free world, all the ideals that let's engage together, encourage cooperation across borders. But then we entered an era of uncertainty. We call it an era of great power competition. And by looking at the great powers, what we call great powers, dear viewer, that is the United States, that is Russia, basically that's China. Basically, you're looking at the P5, the permanent members of the UN Security Councils, the ones that have the veto powers. France is there, of course the UK is there. So the question is, when we entered an era where these powers began competing for resources, and guess where all these resources must come from? Africa, and Uganda in particular, Uganda being part of Africa, they have to come here. So the entire world is competing for resources. Everyone wants to be on top. The Americans are saying we are still the big dog. The Chinese are saying, you guys have stayed too long on that mountain, and we think we can take over. And where you see China, there is Russia, you know, they cooperate. And so the US had to take in a protectionist kind of view. So with that, it changed the entire foreign policy outlook. So you need somebody, you need, and this is where I thank our government for our foreign policy strategy of non-alignment, because Uganda is a founding member of the non-aligned movement, and we are the chair still, and basically it means we are not tied to one great power. Okay. Meaning we have leverage, meaning we can choose, and this is where the person occupying that docket of foreign affairs has to know. We can choose.
I want to bring in Mark into this conversation, but before he even comes in, I want to ask the both of you, Natasha and Nasa, when you look at the person who has been holding the office, General Odong J.J. Abubakar, how did he perform? He performed, I would say, quite fairly. But there were scandals, you know.
They were there. The scandals, if you notice, they have come in at the later end. The scandals have come in. In fact, I can fix them within the past 5 years. Most of the biggest scandals we've had. And where you see scandals from a governance perspective, that represents a breakdown in structures, because the internal structures are not working, so people can overstep. Why? Because most of our ambassadors are not career diplomats. They're political appointments. Once you lose your seat, don't worry. The big man with the hat will give you a juicy position in the diplomatic corps. And so that is why some of those issues came up.
Okay. Yes. But Natasha?
I think I agree with Barak, but I also would like to highlight that those scandals were very humiliating. I feel like the one that's very close to memory is the one with the casinos. So we were getting we had a very poor reputation, and I think even the handling of the crisis with the most of our population goes over to Dubai and stuff like that, money laundering, and our failure to really zoom in on IGAD and all these institutional bodies and negotiate better for people across the board, I do think was lackluster. And going back to Mr. Adonia, I think Adonia defended some of that gambling thing, which made him look very bad in the eyes of the people who opposed his vetting policy. So just to go back to that, but why maybe he was a fair target for the opposition. But I just do want to say, I don't think we've done the best of our potential, which is the best, and I don't think we have really been fair to our people abroad. But we've had some very notable successes, and like how Barak has pointed out, it's also been squelched into the past 5 years. So he did fairly well.
Mark, Uganda's foreign policy, amongst the things that we have emphasized since time immemorial, or historically, post-independence, has been regional security. So how does Uganda convert its security influence in East and Central Africa into economic leverage and investment attraction?
This is a really nice question, but I think just maybe to attribute to this before I get the timing of the appointment vis-a-vis the transition that we are undergoing is quite critical, because when you look at the fact that now economic interests are superseding political will and good representation globally, you will have to look at the way the appointments are being made and whether we are positioning ourselves critically or very well to take advantage of some of the benchmarks that have already been set. For example, when you look at the regional security, our influence in terms of our regional security has been very tremendous. You've seen our deployment in various East African countries. You've seen our deployment in different African countries. The partnership with the different the different bilateral partners that we have, like the US. We see the likes of the China. So we see that where we stand regionally, it can be a very good place to give us a very good political capital. However, the key question lies on how we translate that into the economic activities that we would like to benefit. For example, when you look at one of the leverages that Uganda critically has, is we sit in the heart of East Africa. So that means we have the ability to connect both the East and the Central regions of Africa. So the security component and our contribution towards security has always remained very, very key. But then secondly, it is also hinged on our regional integration. I think the president has been very, very key on that. Currently is chairing the ESC committee, where we've seen our expansions to different regions, including COMESA, SADC, and now the CFTA that is like taking shape. So in terms of security, regionally, yes, we have a very good standing. We can use that as a leverage even when we're negotiating. Perhaps you can use it as a way of, we are the hub for maybe to safeguard the gateway between Central and East Africa. So that is a very good thing. But now translating that to the domestic, vis-a-vis our foreign policy for any country is as strong as the national policies. So when you look at the concerns that are coming up, the security concerns, the increased violation of the rule of law, then the question comes in as to whether, when an investor looks at the current regime, vis-a-vis the security that we've been having all through the region, and as Uganda being the guarantee of that particular security, our domestic security questions may also come into play. So that's where the governance component usually comes in, because even when you look at even the budget allocations vis-a-vis other important sectors that could be having social dividends, governance and security has been one of the, as always has the lion's share, the lion's share. So that means, as much as we are focusing on all this, us leveraging our security, the security component and regional integration is very, very key, and will be premised so much on the domestic, how the domestic foundations are built, especially in this transition. When you look at the budget, the current budget that was passed, government is set to be given the recommendation to graduate to the middle income status. So with all the security components and all concerns being taken place, if we do not deal with the foundational things that are going to be very key, especially in this transition period of 5 years, because by around 20 to 32, that's when we'll be actually confirmed to be in that particular category. So if the security question is not dealt with, the production capacity is not dealt with, the governance structures are not dealt with, to deal with our domestic foundation, even all the accomplishments that we would have gotten in the region may be compromised in the long run.
Barak, just post-COVID, we had summits in here.
Yes.
NAM, G77.
Yes.
Then afterwards, we had the CADEP summit that had agriculture-related, conversations. Different countries joined us amongst the others. Majority African countries, but then we also had serious players on the, diplomatic level of things.
Yes.
Did we, if we are to go back and see how the partnerships we established during those summits, have they built any level of substance for our country? Or it's just, we've hosted these events, it's done and dusted, because we never go back to review?
Thank you. That is why I began this conversation by saying we suffer from a chronic problem of being a reactionary country. Actually, it's not a Ugandan thing. Professor Hofstede studied over 100 countries. And in cultural studies, they classify African nations as reactionary nations. They say we do not initiate. We rather follow what somebody else has already decided. You see? So even these events, we host them. But beyond the event, try to look up what's happening. You will not find much. You will say, okay, beyond saying, okay, we've hosted a conference, but you ask the common man and you say, how did the Mama Mboga benefit from that conference? Did any of the delegates who attended that conference, were they taken to, say, the craft market to do some shopping? Were they taken to some of our places to leave money in the economy? Amos Wekesa has given a proper record of how we handle the visitors who come here. It's a fact that when somebody comes with $10 let me I'm giving the baseline, they go back with almost 60. Because after doing the parks, after visiting the parks, and probably getting a bad experience because of our poor roads going there, or probably the car breaking down somewhere, or having a medical emergency somewhere remote and there is no medvac to evacuate them to the nearest. So after enduring that, after they have seen our big five, they go away with the rest of the money. Why? Because we do not have the infrastructure, we do not have our institutions are not aligned to make sure that that visitor spends money here. In Uganda, even if you make the money here, you can carry as much as you want away. In other words, we are the only country that allows people to come in very freely and people to carry away whatever they make. I've been in other nations.
And then we squeeze those.
Yes, and we squeeze the Mama Mboga who is trying to find some school fees for that child. And then tomorrow we'll say, why are those children being taken to school on a border? Why can't they be taken in a van? But you've not interrogated. Do your people have the capacity
to afford that van service?
And maybe also to pivot back to that question of security. If you look, I'll give you an example. Look at when we benchmark as Ugandans, mostly, we benchmark using our regional friends.
And chances are high to come up on top of some scenarios.
Let me tell you one thing that I remember. One time President Kagame was addressing his people. And one of our senior journalists, who was also an advisor that side, said, try to give an example of the neighbors. And President Kagame shut him up mid-conversation, told him, if we keep comparing ourselves to failures, to our fellow poor people, we are never going to get where we want. And that's the number one mistake that Uganda keeps making. We look, we say, oh, East Africa. No, see, our inflation is the lowest. See, this, and you've hosted them here, you've heard them talk. That's what they keep regurgitating over and over again. But the question becomes is, when you look at the best military in the world, look at the US military, you will find that in every area they are in business. They are run as a business institution, not just as a military. And I've seen, yes, I commend, we have our Wazalendo, I've seen they produce water, they do what. But you see, the military should be in charge of also economic intelligence. Meaning they should be able to say, wait a minute, we provide security in DRC, we provide security in Somalia. Can we provide a way for our people in exchange for securing Somalia? We want to make sure that our businesses can come there. Look at the good work. Do you know we secured Uganda single-handedly, ensured that Southern Sudan became a nation? But do you know who reaped the fruits? Kenya. Go to South Sudan. You'll find Kenyan businesses. You'll find Kenyan banks. You will not find a single Ugandan bank over there. Yet we provide security over there. Go to Somalia. Salam Bank has even come here. Show me a single Ugandan bank that is in Somalia today. You see, we need to stop being a reactive nation. We need to redefine ourselves as proactive problem solvers. And that is the job of the military. The military should be able to say, look, we are in DRC. There is huge mineral potential here. Yes. Since we are building, you even heard, At one point, we were building roads in the DRC.
In the DRC, yeah. True.
So we are building roads over there. Now, the question, it should be put in clear writing that if we are building these roads for you, we want to have this. Maybe let some of your main roads be processed in our country because we have security. No, we will benefit.
You want to add something here?
I also wanted to look at the component of, beyond just looking at that, it's the correlation between government institutions. Because you'd find from the strategic point of view, Uganda is being marketed as a very good destination for tourism. Right now we are having the MICE, that is meetings, conferences, exhibitions and the rest. But the ability of the would-be institutions that are supposed to be following up on these particular engagements could be lacking. So, for example, you would find that whereas the different Ministry of maybe Foreign Affairs through the different ambassadors are negotiating meetings to come into Uganda, how is trade positioning itself, the Ministry of Trade positioning itself to actually make a follow-up on these particular activities? Usually, I think the East African Business Summit usually is mostly is centered around in Uganda, majorly is hosted in Uganda, but to what degree do our people from our Ministry of Finance, from Ministry of Tourism, from Ministry of Trade, follow up with these investment opportunities? Because it is one thing for us to say that we had 3.5 million people passing through our airport and then ask what were the resultant investments, and then you cannot see any. So, and also then maybe also we could, maybe the government is not being transparent with the investment agreements that it's negotiating because of the different weaknesses in our legislature that maybe could be hindering that, and maybe that's why we are not seeing this particular results. So the coherence between the political affiliation or the executive bringing up these meetings and attracting these types of attention to Uganda without necessarily putting in place the institutional capacity of the follow-up like institutions to actually spearmark on this. For example, as a president, I invite you, or as a father, if I invite you into my home and you promise my son something, maybe it's the mother that is supposed to make a follow-up on that because maybe I'm focusing on something that is larger for my household. So how are we putting these government institutions to work together alongside one another, rather than just one ministry spearleading on something while leaving the other institutions that are supposed to be carry-ons behind?
Because I wanted to give you a very big example, and I want Natasha to also start from there. We've been in Ebola scenarios just of recent. Now, after the first case, of course, the US, you've got to see the UK coming up with, guidelines and advisories over how people would be coming in. Then the next thing, visa restrictions. But then at the center point of everything was the Ministry of Health. So entirely giving updates, and maybe the Uganda Media Center. And it's on a few occasions that we've seen our foreign ministry. Maybe we would say we didn't have an acting minister then, but then we didn't have so much from them. And yet when you mentioned Amos Wekesa, I've seen his text saying the Ministry of Health, the government needs to come fully and support, because the tourism industry is dying simply because of those Ebola cases. And then everybody who is engaging in cross-border trade is also suffering. So Natasha, in such scenarios, how then do we navigate some of these issues? Because this is not the first time we have Ebola. It has been coming in phases.
Yeah. True. Okay, so the first thing that I'd like to say is I feel like sometimes we don't see a lot of backdoor diplomacy. So I think maybe there was something that was done backdoor, and you could see the evidence in that is that you saw the Uganda Media Center. We have a very vocal spokesperson now, Mr. Alan Kasuja. He came out immediately and he reported that the cases were being inflated by Dr. Tedros, from WHO. And what you saw next was he came down and then he worked hand in hand with the ministry and he lowered the number of cases, and he evidenced that Uganda was handling Ebola really, really well and there was no crisis there. So I feel like there was a lot of stuff that maybe we didn't see happen maybe on social media or in the newspapers, but I think there must have been some backdoor diplomacy to ensure Uganda was safeguarded. The second thing that we did is, if you can see what's happening in DRC comparatively, even if we have a porous border, is that the cases that are being noticed in DRC and, you know, what's over there isn't happening in Uganda. And we have to look at our history of handling Ebola. Uganda has a very good success rate. I think one of our national heroes that people really celebrated was somebody who combated Ebola in northern Uganda. So we have a really good history with that. And I think we've been quite successful at on the media front. And also, I'm pretty certain backdoor diplomacy, working hand in hand with WHO, and then securing Ebola. Also, we took a lot of money from the States to combat that Ebola crisis. So I feel on that front, I think that was kind of well handled, a lot better than what I saw with COVID.
Okay, COVID had issues though.
A lot of
from the internal ministries,
Yeah.
from every sector of the
So-
country really had issues with COVID. Yeah.
Yes.
Barack, I wanted to mention that for me, one of my lowest moment and one of the major things that I found problematic with that, and it shows again that we do not have systems thinking. Our different MDAs, they don't talk to each other. Our different databases, they don't communicate with each other. Yeah? Because this was something that was majorly in the DRC. Why was there, and we have a whole ministry of information on national guidance to guide the flow of information. We have that ministry. Yeah? Now, what we do not have, and we have another ministry of disaster preparedness. Yeah? But remember what I said in the beginning? We are a reactionary nation.
Actually under the
Yeah?
OPM, disaster
You've seen,
preparedness.
yeah? They are funded. All of them are always funded on time. Every budget, money is allocated. But what disappointed me most was that a crisis happened elsewhere. And we allowed our nation to be branded as if alongside.
Because one of the things Alan Kasoja was fighting was that every foreign
Yes.
report was showing
Uganda,
Al Jazeera, CNN,
DRC, Uganda.
DRC,
So you could
DRC.
actually be
So
a
it's like we
tourist,
were twinning.
a
in-
tourist
in
out
scenario.
there, a tourist out there, and I will tell you, who was thinking about Uganda, and I have friends who work in that sector, and they've experienced massive cancellations, massive.
Right.
Their business has been hit badly, you know, but it failed because we did not have a strategy of how to communicate. We do not have a strategy of how should information flow. Should there be an emergency or a disaster? What is the chain? Who reports what? We seem to say, because it's your duty, you should be the one to speak. But we should always speak thinking about, if I say this, what's going to be the impact of that? Let me give you an example using something you already know. I was in the UAE when COVID hit. You guys here did not see people collapsing on the streets. We saw people collapsing on the streets in Dubai. I was there. In Deira, we were there. You know? We saw, but people died. Their figures did not come anywhere close. But do you know how quickly the UAE opened up? They opened up very quickly. And they managed the flow of information. They were like, no, you cannot say that. They have a strict policy over there, so strict that even if missiles have been raining over their skies. Have you seen any of their citizens posting or anything circulating online showing how extensive the damage is?
No,
That is what a nation with a clear strategy of what to do when shit hits the fan does.
Okay,
we don't have such.
Colleagues, I want us to end this conversation looking at Uganda's oil and gas. Europe is seeking alternatives to, Russian energy supplies, and Asia's demand is now continuing as well. But Uganda's oil production is where we have so much attention, because we've been speaking about Uganda's first drop of oil has the chance to open doors for economic prosperity. We are looking at growing our economy by 2040. These are a 10-year
Tenfold growth
10-fold
strategy.
And the economy,
50 to
according
500.
according to the president, will grow. But when you look at us as a country that is anticipating becoming an oil exporting nation, where do we fit in within the evolving global energy architecture? I want all of you to answer that question for me, along the way as we're summing up with our conversation.
Okay.
Tasha?
Okay, so I think for me, oil is like a great disappointment. I think I remember as early as 2010, because it got announced in 2006. I saw a lot of people prepare. You know, people who are even like buying vehicles to be part of the logistics team. You know, I think every Ugandan, as much as we knew that our corruption, our silo stuff, our tribalism, everybody was really excited, you know, to be an energy producer, because you knew even if we didn't get a slice of the pie, something would trickle down to our economy. So I feel like it's been a great disappointment, and I think in the past year, in the past financial year, the thing that most economists were boasting of is how the shilling had appreciated and how our exports were doing really, really well. Then this shock with the Strait of Hormuz happened, and I think it was such a punch in the gut, because everybody had said if we had had oil, we could have really, really like benefited from that like explosion in prices, and we could have, you know, been a very good, you know, could have been a very good economic win. So I feel like we've been saying oil is coming for a very, very long time, and I feel like my answer is the same. We all hope that it happens, but I think most people are kind of losing hope, or they've kind of like detracted their investments, or they've lost so much because of, you know, that kind of that length of time. But as anybody would be, I am hopeful for oil, but also as somebody who loves the environment, I'm also worried about the pipeline and where it goes through. Both Tanzania and Uganda, they have the sites there. I think even Tanzania has a lot of heritage sites, and I think the most beautiful part of our country is going to go through the pipeline. And then when you see what has happened to a lot of nations, of course that can't, you know, that's put into question. And then also the land grabbing and the lack of compensation of some of the locals, and also even like the things that were built in anticipation of oil, like the Hoima Stadium, and you know, its failure to meet standards with CAF. All those things are very greatly disappointing.
Still questionable,
but of course,
though,
yeah,
so
as a person, as a human
such.
being, of course, I would love this for my nation. I would love for us to be an energy producer, but yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath. Yeah.
Barack. Okay, thank you. I will speak about this from a governance perspective, as I'm not just in foreign policy, but I have a history and a past and present of pushing governance compliance in this nation through the Institute of Corporate Governance of Uganda, the ICGU. And I'll tell you one very good thing that I'm happy with, that for the first time, the National Planning Authority, the NPA, has seen it fit to say, okay, if we are going to achieve that tenfold growth strategy, moving from 50 billion GDP to 500 billion GDP in US dollars by 2040, we need to have governance structures in place. Because without governance, you don't have institutional sustainability. And one of the major things you notice in the nation is you go to a ministry, and if one person is not there, nothing can run. You go, you want something, and say, oh, the officer in charge of that, and you're like, wait, you mean that's the only guy who works here? Because the structures, like we keep using the word siloed, but actually what that word means is, in Uganda, every institution is doing its own thing. And even when you go there, you'll face a lot of resistance. No, this is our mandate. We are supposed to do this. Look, you are all children in the same house. How about you say, the collective goal of House Uganda, because this is our home, is to move from point A to point B. What are you doing? If you need something from me to help us achieve the collective goal, let's do it, instead of saying, no, my mandate is this, my mandate is that. If we align, if that oil comes and our governance, corporate governance structures are not in order, the oil curse is going to be inevitable. Because you need systems to manage resources. Otherwise, you'll have a more of the same, whereby you have a resource, but only a few people have access to that resource. Only few people are benefiting.
Mark, how do we change that oil curse to benefit Ugandans?
For the biggest part, the oil and gas has been looked at as the magic bullet that is going to solve all Uganda's problems. And yet,
is it viable?
And yet, the truth is, beyond just the oil and gas, the other aspects that have to accompany it. How do we ensure that the investment regime is sufficient enough? How do you look at our tax regime to be predictable enough to enhance people to invest? But nonetheless, the attention that we are going to get globally, especially with constraints with the increase of the Asian demand for oil, the Russian question in terms of the markets, I don't know if we are ready for the attention that may come with the actual production of the oil. Because when you look at the scrutiny that is going to come in terms of our governance component, may be there, because now we are looking at the regional energy security, now also based in Uganda. How do we leverage this production of oil and gas to maybe support the aviation ambitions that Uganda has? How do we strengthen, for example, how do we take advantage of the fact that, for example, if Dangote has, the Dangote refinery is completed and it's producing jet fuel, how do we channel traffic from Europe maybe to look at Uganda as a strategic hub to connect the Asia to maybe the Latin Americas? So the question is, the production, yes, is inevitable. It's going to happen. How we are prepared to take advantage of the opportunities that are attached to it is the question that we need to answer critically as a country.
Oh, gentlemen and lady, thank you very much for your takes on geopolitics and diplomacy matters. A conversation that I have fully enjoyed from an engagement perspective, not even as a host. My three guests this morning: Natasha Hadija Sebunya, Foreign Policy Analyst. Thank you for joining us. Mark Mutumba, Geoeconomist and Foreign Policy Analyst. Thank you again. And then Abdul Nasser Barak, also a Foreign Policy Analyst. They've been part of our conversation this morning as we're looking at cautioning Uganda against geopolitical economic shocks. We do return with more conversations, including developments from West Nile and more at the Mulago Cancer. Every day across Uganda, businesses are competing for opportunities, from contractors building roads and schools to suppliers delivering medical equipment, office furniture, agricultural inputs, and other essential goods. Now, many businesses rely on tenders and contracts to grow when you look at things. Yet for many entrepreneurs, winning a contract is only part of the journey. Before they can even submit a bid, they often are required to provide a bid security. And once that is done, they need financial capacity to mobilize for resources, purchase materials, and at the end of the day, make sure that they deliver on time. So how can businesses position themselves to compete for bigger opportunities without being held back by financing constraints? We're going to have a conversation with a representative from KCB Bank Uganda in regards to the bid and the bid bonds in Uganda's market. Now, joining us on set this morning from KCB is the Manager Trade Finance at KCB Bank Uganda Limited, Hiria Fred Saul. A very good morning, Hiria.
Good morning, Joram, and thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay.
And to our dear listeners, our dear viewers out there, it's nice having you on board.
Okay.
And to just pick from where you started, the question on bid bonds. So yeah, bid bonds are very important in the procurement process world over. And basically, for our viewers to understand why bids are very key for them, the entire procurement process, is because bid bonds are a sign of commitment. A sign of commitment from the bidding entities or the organizations that are competing for jobs. So let's look here. If an organization puts out an advert, for example, they want suppliers, people to build classrooms, people to supply raw materials, and so forth. So the project owner wants confidence that the people that are participating in the tendering process are very serious, and if awarded a contract, they will fully execute as per contract requirements. So the first instrument that gives a contractor an opportunity to participate in the bidding process is a bid bond. So it basically demonstrates the commitment and gives the procuring entity confidence in the bidding process and that all parties are very serious. So it's very key for that process. And of course, after bidding process has been concluded, the employer will expect other documents to support the bidding entity. So then you will come into the performance guarantee, which also commits that if you get the job contract, you'll execute as per contract requirements. So it rather gives comfort that if you're given the job to supply books, let's say A4, you'll supply A4 books. And in case you fail, the employer will have recourse using the performance guarantee. So bid bonds are really key, and why we are coming out right now is to just look at the government cycle. As the financial year ends, there's a new financial year that is opening on 1st July.
1st July.
And that comes with very many opportunities for small entities, large entities, and so forth. So then it is very key for them to understand how the bid bond is very key for them to participate and compete for such contracts once the new financial year has opened.
Okay, and some people assume these opportunities are for always bigger companies or, you know, the large-sized companies. How is KCB enabling the SMEs and growing businesses to compete?
Yeah, thanks, Joram. Again, to our viewers, this is one of the largest misconceptions in the market. Many people expect that all the large contracts are left for the big players in the market. But over time, from a banking perspective, we realized that even small and medium enterprises equally have the same opportunity, the same platform to compete for such jobs. But what is limiting for them is usually having the right partners on board to ensure they are given opportunities to compete with such large entities. And I think that's where KCB now comes in to bridge that gap, so that even the small and medium enterprises, those that feel are not playing in the big league. So KCB has designed solutions that ensures that even those small players, if the opportunities in the market, they equally have a platform to compete with the large companies. So one of the things that we've done as an institution is to roll out an unsecured bid bond proposition. This one's very key for contractors because, like I said, it's the first entry into competing for a contract. So it's unsecured up to 1 billion, irrespective of the size of the player, the size of the company. As long as you see an opportunity, approach KCB. This platform is free, not free, but it's unsecured. You don't need any security to compete. So you just approach the bank, submit your bid bond applications, and the bank will support you. Okay. Within a day, you'll have a bid bond out. So it gives all entrepreneurs across the spectrum opportunity. Are you a small enterprise? Are you a young entrepreneur that is seeking to break out? This is an opportunity for you to see that as you plan for the new financial year, KCB is the right partner for you. We shall enable you to scale and partake in these opportunities.
Well, you know, winning a contract is one thing, and then there is also executing it. So what happens after, let's say, the SME has won the bid and is now taking on the contract? How do you then support them along the journey?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that question. So usually when companies win contracts, when they submit bids, sometimes they think winning the contract or the bid is the end of the road. But then often you need a financial partner that will help you execute the contract. Because when you're in a contract and you don't have a right partner at hand, then you struggle to execute the contract. Then many companies end up failing at this stage. But as KCB, we look at this entire cycle from when you win the contract. When we win a contract, we have solutions. We'll give you performance guarantees. They will enable you, give comfort to the employer that you will really execute the contract when you are awarded. Then after, we'll give you the advance payment guarantees. These again help you unlock funds that an employer has. So they give you money to kickstart the projects. But what's most important for us is without any of those, We have an unsecured proposition of about 800 million, meaning for contract financing. Meaning immediately when you have won a contract and you need to mobilize, to deliver materials, deploy staff, there's 800 million within the bank that is purely unsecured that will help you unlock the contract and to start on the job.
Okay.
Then if you're done with that, you can come in and the bank will give you still unsecured invoice discounting, meaning you've performed the contract, but you have receivables that the employer needs to pay. But because we don't want you to wait for a longer period, then the bank will give you unsecured invoice discounting of about 1 billion to enable you access funding quickly and execute contracts. So in other words, as KCB, we don't just support you in the contracts, but we partner with you to ensure that you deliver successfully once you are awarded the contract.
All right. And away from that, let's just end up with your message for the businesses listening in and watching us this morning.
So I think my message to all viewers and Ugandans, the small entities that are trying to win contracts, the large players that are playing the oil and gas sector, those importers that are importing key materials to this country, don't let financial concerns prevent you from pursuing opportunities that can transform your business. So at KCB Uganda, we are very committed to enable your business scale through accessing the various financial solutions. Be it unsecured tax bridge loans, we have a proposition that actually caters for taxes for importers, up to 4 billion unsecured. Be it working capital loans, are you a coffee exporter, a commodity exporter, name it all. We have these solutions in place, and what is key for you is to visit us at any of our branches, or we will reach you at your office premises to ensure that we discuss this, to see that we are part of your story and your financial journey.
Well, as the saying goes, opportunity rarely knocks twice, and our conversation has been really talking about how the KCB brings on board SMEs to also compete favorably for this bid for the bid bonds in the market, so that you can also participate. And you never know, if you participate and use KCB, you will be able to successfully secure that bid and win it. Thank you again, Hiria, for being part of our conversation. Hiria Fred Sol is the Manager Trade Finance at KCB Bank Uganda Limited. Now, away from that conversation, the local council 1 LC1 elections in Uganda will be held next month on the July 28th, 2026. We do have some developments from Kabale. Israel Ahumuza is updating us on how prepared the area is for the LC1 elections.
Robert is the regional election officer in charge of Southwest. Thank you so very much for being here with us.
Thank you so much.
Now that the roadmap is out, and on 28th, we are going to the polls and vote. Yes. How are you prepared for this election, sir?
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, NTV. Thank you, the listeners out there. Yesterday, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, through a press release, issued 2 roadmaps. One for the LC1 and 2 chairperson elections, what we call administrative unit elections, and another one for women councils and committee elections. So, to that extent alone, we are prepared because we have a roadmap. A roadmap is simply a map of the road. Yes. So we know where we're going to begin and end in that road. So we have key milestones in that roadmap. We have verification, stock registration of willing residents and willing women. We have display of those registers. We have nominations, and we have polling. And remember, these elections are progressive in nature. The administrative unit elections stop at level 2. Yes. The women council and committees elections progress up to national level. So at a certain point in time, the roadmap for women, councils and committees will outlive the LC1 and 2 and go up to national. Yes, how ready are we? The respective district election officers in all the districts of Uganda and in Southwest in particular, which I can speak for, they are prepared. They have been instructed to recruit village election officers, 1 per village, to kickstart this roadmap with registration. So these are the officers who will be manually compiling registers of willing residents and willing women.
All right.
So to that extent, we are prepared.
All right. He talks about the preparation and he says they are ready for this election. Sir, how many villages are within your jurisdiction?
As at the time of polling in the general elections that we've just concluded, Uganda had and still has 71,214 villages. Of those villages, southwestern Uganda has 9,673 villages, making 13.6% of the total figure for villages. So up until this point, I don't know of any administrative units that have been added to this figure that I have mentioned.
Any issues?
Yes. In southwestern Uganda, in as far as this program for LC1, 2 and women councils and community relations is concerned, I would say that some of the peculiar issues are, 1, the level of participation for women in their own women councils and committees elections is really low. And you find that in the previous activities, stakeholders and parties struggle to obtain candidates to fill those slots. In many cases, the women are head-hunted to fill those slots. Of course, it will beg the question why. But I think one of the peculiar reasons is that the women themselves probably are struggling to understand the relevance of the offices that they are contesting for. They are struggling to understand the terms of reference of these offices. Probably there are no pecuniary benefits attached to these offices. So at the end of the day, as they struggle to understand these offices, the truth comes to the shore that these offices are, at the end of the day, are just structures that are progressive for the higher offices. So that's one issue. Another issue which cuts across all types of elections in Uganda, be it electoral college, be it lining up, be it adult suffrage, and has been well documented, what we call money in politics or commercialization of politics. We have that evil. So there seems to be a thinking amongst voters and candidates that to participate in elections meaningfully, you must have some money to either appease the voters, and even if you don't want to appease them, they will remind you, they will have the liberty to remind you that, look here, if you don't give us something, we shall also not do something. So if you ask me, we have that. That is a civic competence issue now. It's a gap to fill. I don't know how long it will take, but that is room for improvement for all of us and not just the Electoral Commission.
All right. Thank you so very much, Bob Veine. And maybe finally, within a minute, what is your message to the electorates and the country at large?
My message to the country at large is that acquaint yourself with the various dates within the roadmap for LC1 and 2. There are days for registration, there are days for nomination, and there are days for polling. Internalize those dates. To the voters out there, please turn up massively at your respective village registration centers and register to participate in the village elections. Registration is not automatic. that because you have a Ndangamuntu, therefore you are on an automatic register somewhere. No, this register is not derived. It is compiled by your willingness to report and be manually registered.
Right.
The candidates, please make sure that you are able to tell the residents how you want to transform their societies. That's all I can say.
Thank you so very much. I'm glad having you, Bwana Bob. Back to you, my colleague in the studio.
Humuza, thank you very much for that update, and quite an interesting point of conversation there. And speaking of the elections, like I did mention, the LC1 elections will now be held Tuesday, 28th, 2026. The Electoral Commission did announce and unveil the final roadmap following the release of 56 billion Ugandan shillings to fund the long-delayed administrative unit elections across 71,214 villages nationwide. Now, when you look at the election roadmap, the compilation and verification of the village general voters register will be from the 6th of July to the 10th of July, July 9th to July 14th, collection of nomination forms from parish election officials. Then July 13th to July 14th, public display of the compiled village voter registers for review and cleanup. Then July 15th to July 19th, for more candidate nominations. That will be at sub-county, town or municipal division headquarters. And then official campaign window for all nominated LC1 candidates runs from July 20th to July 27th, 2026. July 28th, 2026, polling day with voting. The voting will be by lining up behind preferred candidates between 11 a.m. Between 11 a.m. starting from 11 a.m. to 4. Well, that covers what you will be expecting from those particular elections. But please do note, the Daily Monitor is up and running on the stands. You can easily grab yourself a copy and read more about it. Also online at the E-Nation as well. Follow us more on the app, that is on social media, NTV Uganda, X, Instagram, and on the website, www.ntv.co.ug/news. I'm Jerome Paul Sonko. I wish you all the best for the day. Coming up on NTV is Mwasoza Mtia. There is going to be an interesting conversation in terms of photography and pictorial. A man behind President Museveni's pictures or photos, Abu Mwesigwa, does join Stella Nante on Mwasoza Mtia. Be part of that conversation.